Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, Luliker, Shills, Deathsley, Search, Peasants, Vassals, Minions, Meat Sacks. I'm usefully at welcome. So, I did a video on this before, but I'm going to do another video because we've gotten confirmation from a real high place, and that's the whole idea that the Israeli so-called Hannibal Directive was used on October 7th with the Hamas attack on Israel. And the Hannibal Directive basically gives the Israeli military wide parameters for basically killing not only Palestinians and Hamas, but also Israelis. And the reasoning behind it was the idea that any Israelis captured by the Palestinians were going to have a fate worse than death, so we might as well kill them and not give the Palestinians the satisfaction. But the fact is, used on a wide scale, it would seem to indicate that a lot of Israelis killed that day were killed by Israel themselves. But this new confirmation that we've gotten is pretty striking. The defense minister at the time, who was sacked afterwards, is the one who ordered the Hannibal Directive. And he pointed out the fact that in some areas it was used more than others. But he's giving direct confirmation that indeed it happened. And we've had all kinds of minor confirmations of the Hannibal Directive on October 7th from various sources, but this one is probably the most substantial that we've seen so far. Israeli media Hertz did an investigation. They found out that Palestinian attacks on 3 military facilities were met with a widespread use of the Hannibal Directive. And then we also have Professor Mearsheimer, very, very reliable, who pointed out 8 months ago that there was a report that the Hannibal Directive was used on a wide scale and army bases, and all the vehicles involved, both by Palestinians and Israelis on that day. So 1,139 people were killed, Israelis were killed, and 200 captives were taken. And we will never know how many of those Israelis were actually killed by Israel. I would imagine a pretty substantial amount because they used helicopters, tanks, and drones to carry out this directive. So a fairly massive amount of firepower, which is Israel's specialty. But even the Nova Festival, the notorious Nova Festival, where so many Israelis were reportedly slaughtered, a lot of them were killed by Israeli military forces themselves. We've also had a whole bunch of eyewitness accounts from Israeli soldiers and officers talking about eyewitness accounts of them seeing the Hannibal Directive being used. One Israeli soldier said, quote, "You will open fire without constraints," unquote. So that kind of firepower directed at a very confusing battlefield situation could result certainly in a lot of casualties. And apparently Israel's used this tactic before. They used it in Gaza in 2014 and also in 2016, and they started using it in 1987. So they've been using this tactic for quite a few years, quite a few decades. And I understand the pragmatic, logical realism, but it's still pretty horrifying. And I guess the bottom line, like I say, it would be really amazing to find out just exactly how many Israelis were killed by Israel and not Hamas, and particularly because the Nova Festival was a target of the Hannibal Directive. Of course, all the vehicles that were returning back to Gaza from Israel on October 7th were targets, and there's even eyewitness accounts of Israeli kibbutzes being subjected to the Hannibal Directive and Israeli fire. So, yikes. So there we have it. I'm doing another video on it because now we have confirmation from the top, from the man who directed it, the Hannibal Directive. I'm useful idiot, don't you be one too.